Okay, everyone. We'll get started. Welcome to the World Issues Forum, part of our winter speaker series here at Fairhaven College. My name is John Tuxell. I'm one of the science faculty here at Fairhaven College, but I am teaching the World Issues class this quarter. I'm delighted to welcome you today to our talk by Dr. Iman Mersal, titled Traces of Enayat, What the Archive Remembers. Before we get started, I just wanted to read a land acknowledgement and then thank our sponsors. Western Washington University's main campus is situated on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin all throughout the Sandwich Islands and the North Cascades watersheds from time immemorial. We express our deepest respect and gratitude to our Indigenous neighbors for their enduring care, protection of our shared lands and waterways. May our own contribution to that protection be equally inspiring. Our co-sponsors I'd like to thank for this week's talk include the Foundation for Western and Alumni, which is hosting our webinar, the Center for Law, Diversity, and Justice here at Fairhaven College, the Ray Walpole Institute, and the Department of English. So I'd like to give the microphone to Professor Yanara Friedland, who will introduce our speaker for today.
Hey, welcome everyone. Is this on?
Yes. All right.
Thank you all for coming. Very excited to be here. We've worked out the tech issues, which gave me a heart attack earlier. So thank you for being patient, and I have the great honor to introduce Dr. Iman Mersal, the World Issues Forum. I don't know if you can see me, but welcome. It's good to see you. Iman Mersal is an Egyptian poet, essayist, translator, and professor at the University of Alberta. She is the author of 5 poetry collections and 2 nonfiction books, including How to Mend Motherhood and Its Ghosts, and the award-winning Traces of Enayat, which we have been reading across multiple classes this quarter, and which remains, in my opinion, an unrivaled work that spans several genres, including biography and detective writing, the pursuit of forgotten and missing archives. The work follows the mysterious life and erasure of Enayat al-Zayat, who in 1963, 4 years before her lone novel is finally published, takes her own life at age 27. Iman Mersal retraces Enayat's life and afterlife through interviews with family members and friends, tracking down the apartments, schools, and sanatoriums where Enayat spent her days, mapping 2 simultaneous psychogeographies from the glamour of Golden Age Egyptian cinema to the Cairo of Mersal's own past. The book was first published in Arabic in 2019 and has been beautifully translated by Rada Motor. It's now out with Transit Books. It received the Sheikh Zayed Award for Literature in 2021. And Mersal's work has appeared widely in English. She was also a 2024-25 Cullman Center Fellow at the NYPL. A very warm welcome to Iman Mersal.
Thank you. First, thank you for the invitation. Do you hear me? Just any sign? Yeah, okay. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, I wish this event were in person, but I'm happy anyway to be here. So I am actually not, as you know, not an archival specialist or not a specialist in archival studies. And this is why what I'm sharing with you today is actually a few notes and questions about my experience working in the archive on Traces of Enayat, as well as my book in progress. My first note is actually drawing this similarities and the differences between detective work and working to recover a story in the archive. Documentaries about missing person draw the viewer into the story that begins with absence. Someone has vanished, family members, friends, and colleagues speaks first, recounting the moment they realized something was wrong. It is as though the investigation begins by assembling a personal archive of the disappeared. Part of it, of course, is oral testimonies from those who know the disappeared, and part is from documents. It could be formal documents such as bank accounts, workplace, telephone companies, and it could be also in these days the accounts of the disappeared in social media. The police enter the story as representative of the state, marking the point of which private worry becomes a public matter. As the investigation unfolds, we come to know the missing person, but also we are introduced actually to lists of suspects and witnesses, each carrying a life of their own and a particular connection to the story. Motives emerge, and a good documentary about a crime will actually make you bravely convinced that this must be the cause of disappearance, but then they change the story very quickly because of another discovery. Sometimes a crime appears almost random. Two strangers crossing paths as if by accident, with one deciding in the fleeting encounter the face of the other. Even when the crime and its resolution are already familiar to you, you might continue actually watching as if encountering it for the first time. Drawing less by the promise of justice here, because you might know already who is the cause of the disappearance or responsible for the disappearance. But what makes us continue to watch a documentary like that is really observing movement of inquiry itself. Sometimes the police fail to solve a case. Years pass, attention drifts, and no one remains at work of its riddle, assuming there were a crime to begin with. In the terminology of US police, such a case will be called a cold case. In Arab world, it is described usually as an indeterminate crime. Cold cases in US sit in cardboard of plastic boxes lined up the shelves among identical containers in the archive. Each box bears numbers and holds all files, interviews, recording, medical tests, and so on. Together, they form the fragments of a story that was never completed. Lines of inquiry cut short and discarded one after another. Their dead ends preserved as the necessary residue of a search for truth. This is not the case at all when it comes to crimes against unknown in Egypt, at least. And this will give you, to begin with, an idea about what to expect when you say archive in here and when we said archive in elsewhere, in third world in general, but in Egypt and Iraq, because I experienced both archives in particular. But what if the story began differently? The story of this documentary about the disappeared. What if the police were not searching for a known missing person, but for someone entirely unknown? Remember this kind of genre when a fisherman find a skeleton while he is fishing, or someone juggling in Sunday morning and find a remaining of a person. Here we are in front of anonymous corpse, then someone about whom nothing is known. We cannot say whether anyone ever reported them missing or whether their absence was ever noticed at all. The process known as forensic identification attempts to answer this void by defining who the body might have been: age, sex, distinguishing features, injuries, and maybe an account of the death and its causes. The corpse may be given a nickname and even a face reconstructed by a forensic artist. Here, the victim's body, or what remains of it, is actually the archive. Is the archive for a time until it's known who is they, right? So it is attempting actually to draw parallels between the investigations of a crime and the act of reading crime in the archive. Why reading crime in the archive? Because you will understand maybe by the end of the talk that I always think the question of the archival reader is about a crime of different crimes. So to go back to my point, it is tempting to draw parallels between the investigations of a crime and the act of reading a crime in the archive, between the language of investigation and that of narrative, between cold cases and marginalized or excluded documents, between the absence of evidence and the absence of questions, between the story the body tells us and what we might uncover in the body of the archive. In both cases, the investigators and the archival, the reader face dead end, actually. Sometimes they see lines of inquiry that for a moment appear promising, only to reveal themselves as mirages. Both encounter distraction and frustration, as well as moments of good luck, right? That unexpectedly link two things once thought never being connected. Both are moreover readers of witness and witness testimony. And both have their own ways of readings, violent or patient, and of dealing of actually also expressing what they read and their understanding of it. The word fascination actually comes to my mind always when I think about archive. It's always the ball toward what is hidden or absent, unknown, or contradictory. This fascination may be the deepest bond between the investigator and the reader of archive. The former searches for evidence, but the later, the archival readers, search usually for interpretation and understanding. But it's not only the investigator and the archival readers who are really fascinated with reading the material that is out there. There are so many amateurs archival readers. I mean, all of us could be fascinated with archive without even calling it archive. The scene of someone fascinated to find out everything about an island that vanished because of waves, or a particular word in the dictionary, or exploring the internet looking for something and drifting without even direction. I think by this meaning, all of us are amateurs, archival readers in one way or another. My note number 2 is about Saidiya Hartman. In Lose Your Mother, A Journey Along the Atlantic Slave Route, Saidiya Hartman writes, to read the archive is to enter a mortuary. The word mortuary really took my attention reading Saidiya Hartman. Of course, she was using the word to describe reading the archive while trying to view, or to give a last glimpse of person about to disappear into the slave hold. So my understanding of the sentence to read the archive is to enter a mortuary. Sometimes my understanding will be that, yeah, Hartman is facing the silence, confronting it, the silence in her research into the transatlantic slave trade, or her attempt to narrativize the history of the captives aboard slave ships. The moment she turns to ships, manifests captains, logs, and the journals, the records of press officers, merchants, trial proceedings, documented detailing torture techniques, etc. Hartman does not find the captives waiting for her, it's obvious, nor does she catch a last glimpse of those about to disappear into the slave hold by recounting their suffering in their own words. Instead, she actually had to listen to what they don't say, most painfully to documents produced by those who regarded these same captives as commodities to be traded. To make meaning from such materials, Hartman must attend to absence, silence, and erasure, and must exercise her imagination to inhabit the gaps left by the archive in order to understand and to tell a story. All right. But Saidiya Hartman is not the only one to enter the archive to write or to tell a story about slave trades. Some approached the same topic actually and used similar documents, to tell their stories, but somehow they went to the archive to confirm preconceptions, to search for proof, to validate political, social, moral, or religious claim. Try to imagine with me if someone enter the archive or the mortuary without a question. It's like going to the mortuary to take a selfie with a corpse, right? Or spending time there to say, oh, I saw this with my own eyes, or coming out of the mortuary to say, oh, life is beautiful out of this terrible place. To enter the archive as mortuary is not to investigate how a corpse met its death, so much as to feel compelled to fill in the gaps that render it anonymous. Whether or not one intends to tell the story and share it with others, one might be able to give this corpse a name and lend meaning to its life. The corpse here is the researcher's question, urgent, mysterious, distorted, or even inconsistent. It is a question that issues from the present, from here and now, but lacks the language required to speak itself. Every question, as we know, has a history. We must follow its trail and attend to the earlier moments when it was on the verge of being uttered in order to understand the powers that blocked its path. By following its trail, I'm invoking Jacques Derrida's notion of the trace. The trace in Jacques Derrida's writing is not an origin or a fact. It's actually a configuration that preserves the mark of what has been erased. The purpose of following a trace in the archive is not search for the truth. And this is really what separates completely the police officer who is looking for the cause of disappearance or who murdered who, and the archival reader. So it's not to give a voice also to the voiceless. We don't go to the archive to tell a story, to give a voice to the voiceless. In my opinion, actually, I always ask the question, why do we not see that such an impulse is in essence authoritarian and often leads to speaking for or instead of the voiceless? Furthermore, there is no guarantee that archival research can provide a language capable of voicing every question, or that the language in which we frame these questions will necessarily be comprehensible to others. My third note is about the complexity of the archival body itself. The body of the archive, as we know, is not an organic structure. Various institutions have created, arranged, and categorized it, have made it available, or otherwise concealed it for reasons of their own. The form in which we encounter it is not, it's not natural. When you go to a building to see an archive, you see the arrangement of the material is not just arrangement, it's actually the identity of this archive. The building will contain evidence. The evidence may be distorted or incomplete or inactivate. Do you hear me? Oh, okay. All right. It contains evidence. This evidence may be distorted or incomplete or inactivated of who has a voice. Asking questions in this way about the status and arrangements of this evidence and reconsidering the moment of its creation can assist in reducing this distortion. It is though anyone going to the archive must rearrange it in his mind or in his in their imagination. I think this is the first step to deal with the archive. To give examples of this complexity, and since I'm not a specialist, I have really to talk about, how I saw this complexity of the archive in my own work. So the story of Enayat Zayat in the book, I just will go over it very quickly for those who did not read the book. So in 1993, when I was like young poet living in Cairo, I found a novel in used book stand in Old Cairo. And this novel named Love and Silence by Enayat Zayat, a name and a novel I never heard about. And despite the fact is that I was already a fresh graduate from Cairo, from Arabic literature, and read widely about Arab female writers, but this name, Enayat Zayat, I never saw in any list of Arab female writers or Arab novels in the 50s or 60s. So the first question was really because I was touched deeply by the novel, and I felt it spoke to me in a way that no other female Arab novel it talked to me. I mean, the novel has a whispering voice. It talks about depression. It talks about the search of identity is internal. It's like the Nagleh, the protagonist in the novel, goes out in the world to study or to work or to be active in political whatever, and every time she comes back to her depression and her insomnia, empty hands. And my first question was why this novel is not listed, is not known, and I started to ask questions about the novel, asking writers from the 60s generation, academic, and so on. And it seems like no one knows anything about this novel or its writers. And some gave me some information that later on I will discover that they are not true. So So my first question actually was not about Anayat Zayat, it was about the literary canon. What is excluded and why, and how can we understand the canon itself and the moments of its creation through locating the absence of this novel in it. However, the question shifts, and this is really what distinguishes the archival reader from, let's say, the amateur archival readers or others who just like to go and see interesting stuff in the archive. Because when your question shifts, you feel pushed to follow it, right? And even if you don't have any direction, you have to. And this is what happened exactly in Traces of Enayat. So what is the story of archive in Enayat Zayat? When I started to try to know who is Enayat Zayat and what is the story beyond a novel that was not published in her life, but published 4 years after her suicide, I did not find Enayat in the public or formal archive. And you go to the archive in a place like Egypt, it's not as easy as going to archive, let's say here, because we have this saying in Arabic, it's called ادخل برجلك اليمين, like enter a place with your right hand for blessing, for good luck, right? So I usually think that you have to enter the archive with your right leg, because otherwise, you might have bad luck. So you can go and the person responsible for this material is not there, or this material is concealed, which means you can't see it. Or you got, for example, an old periodical, but the page you want in particular is not there. Someone cut it, took it, and it goes on and on. So in any case, I did not find Anayat in the archive. And dreaming of personal archive, because I was so naive, meeting her closest friend, the famous actress Nadia Lotfi, and her sister and niece, locating them and getting their trust is also a process to talk to them so they can open up to me. And then I was, for my shock, surprised that most of Anayat personal archive was destroyed. And that is the demolishing or destroying this archive is actually part of her story. I mean, who is she? She's a young woman who wanted to be a writer, who failed to be a wife, or and got divorced, court case about custody, depression, and mental health treatment, and so on and so on, and so forth. So the idea here of the absence of the archive would make us question who created the public archive during Jamal Abdel Nasser time, during the nationalism, during the progress and national project. They had a project for a national publisher house that was publishing a book every 6 minutes. But they refused Anayat novel. She didn't fit the agenda of the political discourse of the moment. But what about the bourgeoisie family who destroyed her archive? It's about reputation. It's about they don't want anyone to have access to it. Whatever remained from her archive was what is filtered by the family in order for, someone to see in the future. And this person was myself. Now, the absence of the archive looked for me as a big, enormous disasters. I thought, there is no hope in knowing or understanding. But actually, as I said before, it was the gift of this book, because as soon as you are, facing the absence of the archive, you are thinking actually about the archive in different way. So I started to think about the geography of Cairo itself as part of Anayat's story, the treatment of depression in the 50s and 60s, which the material she was working on in the German Institute of Antiquities in Cairo, her custody case in front of the court. And then you are, as if you are actually creating the archive because you were denied the right to find what has been erased. All right. This is my experience with traces, but it doesn't, the gift actually has so many meanings. It has also the power to make you think that you are not writing a biography or academic book. You are not writing an academic book about Inayat or about the canon. You are not doing this, and that, and then you really have this freedom, I think, to find your own voice telling the story through so many different genera. It was just this gift of having a clarity in particular moment that the protagonist actually, for me, was my journey toward Inayat, not the story of Inayat, not the archive and what it provides to tell the story. But this is not really the only archive I encountered. In my book in progress, which entitled Baghdad Inc., I'm basically working on a book about Baghdad. And in this book, let me tell you just in a minute about what brought me to this, because it doesn't make sense. I'm Egyptian writing about Baghdad. I went in 1992 to visit Baghdad with Arab female writers and activists in solidarity with Iraqi women against the American sanction. And I was the youngest actually among like 80 Arab women from Morocco to Yemen and elsewhere. And going with this good intention to support Iraqi women, when we went to the visit, I actually did not see any Iraqi women at all. The whole solidarity was hijacked by اتحاد النساء العراقي, the Iraqi Association of Women, which actually part of Saddam Hussein regime. They are all Baathists. They are using the same propaganda as Saddam Hussein Baath Party and so on. But I didn't know this then. And I came back from that trip very confused about the idea of solidarity. Where are the Iraqi women? Who are these women that we met? And they don't say anything about the regime. Everything is said is about Arab nationalism and America and so on. This was really made me go back to Baghdad so many times in the last few years, trying to understand what I didn't understand in 1992. One of the ways to understand is really to go to the archive. So is there Iraqi archive? I mean, in Anayat Zayat, there was absence of archive. In Iraq case, as the archive of Iraq has had a significant online presence even since the early days of the internet. I mean, to understand this, you had a dictatorship which used to record every single thing. And this dictatorship concealed the archive when it was in power. But when the regime fell down in 2003, the entire materials became available. How did it become available? First, in 1991, the US captured a building in the north of Iraq with Baath Party papers and took it to the US. And then after 2003, they took the entire regime archive to the US, but not that simple. The archive stayed in Qatar for like a year. They brought people who know Arabic to classify it, and so on. And then the archive arrived to US. And now you can see online, for example, so many projects. One of them is for example, Washington, the Hoover Institution in Stanford, which has over 10 million digitalized papers, more than 1,500 video files, documentation of Ba'ath Party operations from 1968 to 2003. There is other Iraqi in US who made something called Iraqi Memory, and they want to tell the story of the victims of Iraq. But in, for example, some other institutions that link to the US government, all of the papers that are concerning the American-Iraqi relations. So here the archive is available in institutions as well as online, but it is not that simple at all. For me, as someone who wants to tackle a particular story, knowing that this archive is problematic is very important in what we am doing. There is actually this beautiful article written by Wissam El-Shalbi in 2019 entitled Weaponizing Iraq's Archive. So he is talking in his article about the ownership of the archive and the archival displacement and the political life of documents once removed from their original context. So, for example, in this in the book, one of the story, it's not the main story in the book, is about really 1979 massacres of the قاعة الخلد. قاعة الخلد is a place in Baghdad. Saddam Hussein came to power, invite all of the Ba'ath Party leaders to celebrate his presidentialship. But he started to talk, saying, wait a second, we have a conspiracy, and any name will be called now has to go out of the hall. Whoever went out was killed. The video of this قاعة الخول massacre is available even online from beginning to end. And I watched it 8 zillion times, but I never saw one single woman in the audience. In all of the documents I accessed, I didn't see any name of a woman who was victim of this massacre. And actually, I was going in the book telling the stories I'm trying to tell without paying attention at all to this massacre in particular, until one day I saw just a piece of paper in one of the Ba'ath Party investigations files talking about a woman who was taken to prison for almost 7 years, I found later, because her husband was one of the people supposedly involved in this conspiracy during the massacre. So the guy was assassinated. The woman was taken from her kitchen to the prison to be by herself, not knowing even that her husband was assassinated until she came out of prison. This is just an example that you can see thousands of materials about one incident, and this incident itself is even available online, and you can watch it again and again in your own time, but it does not tell you the whole story. The story is, during this massacre, this evening, all of the sisters, wives, daughters, and mothers of these men who were assassinated were taken to prison. Part of the story also is all of these women, even when they came out of prison, lost their jobs and their houses because their houses were under the the control of the state, since the husbands or brothers or fathers were involved in a conspiracy against Saddam Hussein. So this is another example of the complexity of archive. My note, fourth note, is about the archival readers question. I repeated a lot the importance of the archival research, the archival readers questions. I just want to share some ideas about it that I really learned through these two projects. I really think that archival research is rarely driven by one single fixed, clearly articulated question. The idea of a stable central question is kind of simplifying the whole process. Also, a risked question risks becoming something preserved in the research rather than explored. In practice, a central question often changes during the research process. Alongside it emerges marginalized or some urgent questions that guide you towards something else. This so many questions while you are searching might not actually appear in the book or in the story in the end, but they played their important role in shaping the narrative. And this will make me share really, in my experience in archive, I really believe in drifting and the beauty of drifting. Drifting usually starts with fascination. You are fascinated with something. So, for example, the 1979 in Baghdad massacre is really fascinating for me, and I want to understand everything about it. So you are drifting between things and thinking about it, but you don't have any direction. Actually, I don't know how it will. How it could be included or important in my stories. So it's like this drifting, you know, you don't have direction, but you are like walking toward an originary trace, you know. And you feel also many paths are open in front of you with no map or destination. And not all of the bases, of course, are equal because you have a question, you might, you know, dig in one direction more than the other because your heart is telling you that you will find something in this direction. And this will bring me to my last note about this drifting and the questions. I started to feel lately, especially with Iraqi archive research, that it's a completely different experience to be in a building or in a library or in a basement with the neon light and silent, searching for something, and between searching in digitalized archive. So in physical archive, I feel drifting manifest psychologically over time. It's like the time is a line, and drifting here unfolds slowly, shaped by waiting, bodily discomfort, and the material condition. Sometimes you are so scared to hold the document with your hand or touch it because it's so fragile. Moments of anticipation accumulate, waiting for a document to arrive, noticing dust. I'm talking about my experience, for example, in Egypt and Baghdad, in Cairo and Baghdad. There is always faint sounds, minor disturbance. In the physical archive, time passes between requests, returns, and revisits, and the researcher must remember where they left, you know, to come back to. And I have a funny story to tell here. For example, in Cairo, different archive. During my PhD on America and Arabic travel literatures, I had to look at so many documents and newspapers from 19th century, or with traces of Enayat in the archive. If you are having a microfilm in front of you, first you are sitting in a very really not comfortable position, because it's the chair is very high and it's metal, and the microfilm, the screen is up in front of you. But if you have bad luck and you have to use the washroom, you have to submit the work you have, and they will, when you come back, you ask for it again, and they put it again, and you have to remember where you were, especially with newspapers. In 19th century, there was no page numbers. So distraction in this physical archive makes you present, but not comfortable. It makes you sneeze or feel burning in your eyes, or look at people around you. It's like ideas appears to be in the furrow of emergence, only to dissolve as time stretches between visits and shifts. One may leave with the intention of returning the next day to pursue something, but you might not come back until a week later for one reason or another. When working with really digitalized archive, I feel the whole thing is different. You feel there is too much material to handle. There is 20 tapes that are opened in front of you. Some of them is to read, some is to listen, some required you to watch, and you feel also like maybe more distracted than being in an actual physical archive. And also with digital archive, I feel sometimes there is no way to know the story of arrangement, the story of making this particular document or video available and not others, because in so many cases we don't know even who arranged this material or make it available. Maybe it's it's 1:47. I just want to end with actually with Saidiya Hartman again. As I said, Saidiya Hartman wrote "Lose Your Mother." It was published in 2007. In a chapter titled "The Dead Book," Saidiya Hartman was talking about characters on board the slave ship Recovery in 1791. In particular, a nameless teenager who is tortured and murdered, her body thrown overboard. And Saidiya Hartman was talking about this teenager in particular. And the teenager has an image already in the archive, because her story was used by those who are against slave trade and wanted to stop. And the girl image was usually a virgin, pure girl who refused the sexual advances from the captain, and this is why she was killed. But 2 years after Hartman completed Lose Your Mother, where she wrote to read the archive is to enter the mortuary, she wrote actually an article entitled "Venus in Two Acts." And this article, she returns to the mortuary metaphor, but this time in order to consider her previous reading. Why hadn't she written about the other murdered girl, whom she will call in the article Venus? Hartman returns to a character referred to in passing in her 2007 book, in order to examine her decision as a researcher and raise fundamental questions about the limits of archival research. and the possibility of narrating the lives of the subaltern in general. So in Venus, in two acts, Hartiman considers the impossibility of the question, who is Venus? Who is she talking about now? That is difficulty, this difficulty does not only stem from existence of many other women, just like Venus, but because the stories that exist are not about them, but rather about the violence that have been done to them. In Hartiman article, Interdisciplinary comes after the act of reading the archive as well, because after writing a story and working in the archive, you might actually discover that you have to reconsider your previous reading. There is something that was missing or important, but you were not able to see in the moment of researching and writing. Thank you.
Okay, everyone hear me? Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Mersal. At this time, we'd like to take questions from the audience.
Hi, and thank you so much for your talk. Something I really love about your writing is the way that you arrange your archive and research within your prose. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that process.
Thank you. I mean, thank you for your question. I think really there is no one way to arrange the archive in your prose. Every story will arrange the fragments in a particular way. Meaning, with Traces of Enayat, for example, I had to be present in the archive and in my interpretation of the archive, because the story, as I said, in my opinion, the main protagonist was this journey toward Enayat. So I had to be there. And I had to share the moments of frustration and findings with the reader, because the story is about the journey as it goes. But for example, in my work in progress, I feel I'm not there at all. There is something bigger than, I think, any individual to handle when you are trying to write stories of Iraqi women under Saddam Hussein dictatorship, and question the whole thing about solidarity. I feel like there is no one single story I'm trying to tell that needs my interpretation. I feel I wanted to leave stories raw as it is. And my big work is actually to find the language to write these stories. So I'm not sure if I'm clear, but I am trying to say that maybe every experience will come up with its own arrangement of the archival work.
Thank you again for speaking with us. I have a question that I hope doesn't come off as any discredit to the hard work that you do in going through the archive, but I'm really curious about your relationship with fate or luck or intuition or whatever you might name it in
My
guiding
relationship with what? I didn't hear.
with fate or luck or like some sort of intuition that guides you towards archival pieces. I know in Traces of Enayat, you would speak to her sort of being like this unseen kind of guidance at times. And I'm just sort of curious about your perspective on that part of this work.
Mhm. Okay. So what my understanding is you are asking about uh, luck in in the archival research and talking to Inayat in traces, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. You know, it's funny, but I actually believe in good luck in writing in general, not just in archival work or trying to tell a story based on archival work. Luck here doesn't mean like just, good luck from superpower. It's really about drifting and being patient enough to recognize the markers that uh, enlighten your thinking about your subject or about your story. Sometimes these markers are actually words, sentences that can make you go in different directions, trying to develop or articulate your question. Luck also can happen, during the process. Like in Traces of Enayat, I think it was a very lucky moment to learn about the last few months in Anayat life from completely a woman that I didn't know before. I just knocked in her door, Madame Nahas, who was a neighbor of Anayat Zayed. I did not expect really much from this visit, but I was just under my behind my feeling that I wanna see this person. And her story about Inayat love to Saad or the novel she was writing, or this is really, really became so important in my understanding of Inayat. So this is absolutely luck. I mean, it's partly digging and being patient and going there, but also to see this woman and to gain her trust, to sit and have tea with you and talk about whatever. Talking to Inayat in the book was really my way of expressing my feeling about her. I felt, and I think I didn't write a lot about this in the book, but one of the things that fascinated me about Inayat was this also intersection between us, like she wrote her novel 63. I read at 93. We lived within few blocks from each other, but I didn't know her address. The question of individuality she tried to articulate in her novel, and the question of individuality that I had in the early 90s when I read the novel, but I wasn't even able to articulate when I read her. So I feel this kind of, it's kind of, I'm not saying a mysterious relation, but my feeling about it is mysterious. It's not mysterious or anything. My feeling about it is giving me this energy to talk to her as if I know her. And if you spend years thinking about someone and searching everything to know them more, you really have this bond. It's a kind of friendship, right? And when the book is done, you feel like as if a friend is dead, like you are losing someone um, who has been with you for years.
Hello, and if you're going to be with us today.
Raise your voice so that you can hear.
Okay. Louder?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
My question is something that I've grappled with in my writing, and that I think a lot of my classmates have as well, regarding positionality to the people who we are writing about, and kind of this concept of like who has the right to tell what stories and whose stories. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that in general.
Yeah, thank you. uh, Telling a story of the dead, I mean, the dead here, it doesn't mean that they are really dead, but it means that they don't have a voice, they don't talk, right? They are not the one who are talking about their own story, is really complicated and dangerous sometimes. I see a lot in, you know, last 20 years or so, like this cliche of giving voice to voiceless, and why not? I feel nervous about this kind of, you know, uh, sentences or ideas. Um, and in my experience with Anayat, I really thought that displaying her life from A to Z, and saying even everything I knew or I got to know, is not what I want to do. Um, so so telling the stories of others can be also an act of violence sometimes, um, because it's like you have the authority uh, to think that you know, and it tells the whole story. Um, and this is why my position was really just to walk toward here and to leave gaps, not to be crazy about filling all of the gaps. We have fragments, we have the feeling toward this woman, some understandings of her potential, of her life, of the law and geography and work, and what she experienced in her life. But talking about, I mean, owning her voice and displaying her life is kind of would be, in my opinion, flattering of, you know, the best in general, which we are supposedly reading while thinking about someone like Anayat.
Hello, thank you so much for being here today. I'm curious, throughout the book, there are many time periods when space comes between you and Enea, but you always return to her. And I think I'm wondering how or what your relationship with Enea is now after the book has been published. And kind of a part two to that question. You say in the book that you never would have revisited your own archive in the same way if it weren't for Enayat. And I was wondering how your relationship with her has influenced your own understanding of the personal archive.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There are really moments after finishing a project like this, like you go through stages as well. So I think the first stage was kind of, you know, mix between sadness and depression. And this is the time actually the book was published. So the book was surprisingly for me, well received, well read, and I didn't know that some people might be interested in telling a story this way, because it's not a novel, and the novel is a dominant genre at the moment, at least in Arab culture. So this was the beginning, and then when I started to work, so this feeling that Inayat died, someone you think you know, or you tried, you did your best to know, died. So this kind of sadness took time. And then when I think I was in Marseille for 9 months, starting to work on my Baghdad ink. So I started to read, and then I felt like much better about my experience with Anayat. I felt like let the dead, go, and you feel grateful for them being in your life, but that's it. But sometimes I feel when like when I had to look at the book, you write a book, you don't read it again. This is really something so people don't know. But I had to read the whole book upon publication into English. And I had some idea, like not ideas, some regret about few things that I was just not brave enough to include.
Thank you for your incredible work. My question is more of a personal question for you. I think it's very important when talking about telling stories of the archive that if we keep in mind ourselves and our own perspectives. I was wondering if you were to have come across Enayat's novel in a later point of your life, do you think the story you'd be telling and the archive that you'd be collecting would be different, or do you feel it would be the same?
You mean if I read the novel in another time?
Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I actually tried to say this in the book, like our connection to particular artwork or a novel or a poem does not mean that this is the best thing you can read ever. I mean, the main function of literature is really communication, right? This is before anything, before classifying it as post-colonial literature or giving it awards or translating it. It's all about this connection between readers and the art or the text or so. And this is every writer dream, to find a reader who, or to think that somewhere there is a reader who can be touched or enlightened or understands something about themselves through reading what they wrote, So if I read the Inayat Zayat book in maybe 1995, not 93, I might just think about it as a book that a first book, that a female writer tried to write in late 50s, early 60s. It has all of the problems of first book. That's it, maybe. But because I was wounded as a person and I was searching for any Arab female voice to speak to me, and I read Inayat in 1993, this is really the relation with her book. And this happens always with our relation in literature. Sometimes you read something, you don't see it, but you might see it differently later, or you might not see it at all. The idea here is there is a book that can help you articulate what you are going through, from insomnia, depression, which no one was talking about at all in Arab culture, to this internal journey to find your own identity. And the book touched me to the point to ask, well, why it's hidden, why it has been hidden or excluded or not listed in all of these female writers' books. So timing is very good. It's like love, right? You might meet someone, not see them at all, but if the time is different, it could be a completely different story, I think.
Hello. Something that really stood out to me in Traces of Enayat is how you explored gender and the role that it plays in like the storytelling and archival process. And I was wondering at what point in your process of researching and writing did that really start to emerge for you? Or did you always kind of have that in the back of your mind from the beginning?
Oh, no, I didn't have anything in my mind at the very beginning, because at the very beginning I was not even writing a book. I wanted actually to write a piece about the canon of Arabic literature and to bring this novel into the canon and question the canon why this novel was not there. But as I said, your questions shifts from the canon to the novel itself, to Inayat story, and to this journey toward her, and so on. So actually, the book, as you see it now, was the third attempt to write the book. I started first with more academic voice talking about the canon, then I get rid of that. I mean, I didn't write the whole book. I started, and then a second attempt was as if I'm trying to write a biography, so I want to imagine everything and know everything, and then this also failed because I didn't like it personally. I didn't like my voice in it, and I didn't have archive to write a classical biography. And as I said, the moment you are in this, you are enlightening to think that actually what fascinates me at the moment is my journey toward Inayat, my connection to Cairo after so many years living Cairo, to be in North America, through Inayat geography. My question of individuality in the 90s can be seen in light of Inayat question of individuality under the national project during Jamal Abdel Nasser time. So when you position yourself in the story, what is my connection to this story? You find things are coming in their right place in my mind. Like I felt this is really the way to go. I didn't change anything except sometimes, of course, you erase paragraphs or you bring chapter before chapter, whatever, like minor editing. But I was lost until I find this form that meets my positionality in this project.
Thank you so much. I actually have two questions, and I don't know, see if you want to answer both, but my first question is about the relationship between the living work of research encounters that you trace and that you kind of lay out, and then this constant voice from the dead that we are also kind of hearing and that you're guided by. I felt like a huge negotiation of ambivalence between those two logics. And I'm curious about how you actively worked with that ambivalence, or how you made sense of that ambivalence. So that's my one question. My other question is actually about language. And I wrote wrote the novel in Arabic, but it was, as you say, like a painfully acquired language for her. And I'm wondering how it actually reads to you in Arabic, if something of that pain or if that kind of maybe second-handedness is sort of felt in the writing itself, or if it's somehow distinct.
So if I understand your question, I think your first question was about talking to the witnesses and talking to the dead, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So really talking to the witnesses, I didn't know, like we learn through writing lots of things. I didn't know that it is challenging to talk to a witness, like, and why? Because I think it's very important to search for honest testimonies or stories from a witness, but also it's very important to hear false stories about your subject. And contradictory is what keep you going in your research, not the pre imagination, like not a particular right thing you are following to prove. So this contradiction between witnesses are very important for me. And you can see the gap between someone like Nadia Lutfi and the sister, for example. The sister did not use the word suicide for at least 2 years, and during my conversation with her, it took her 2 years to feel comfortable enough to say suicide instead of death when she talks about Enayat. Nadia, the famous actress, was also trying to prove to me always that they were friends and close to the last minute. And this is not lying, in my opinion. It is just really what the memory will do over 50 years of the death of Enayat. Nadia can't believe that in the moment of Enayat's suicide, they were not really close. Nadia was acting in more than 4 or 5 films a year. She was a star and a mother, and has her own also questions really about being an actress and an artist. So negotiating this is really like you don't have any agenda. People talk to you and you are just listening, and then you think about it. And if there is contradiction, don't let it go. The contradiction is very important to be understood. It's actually if we accept things that don't contradict each other, our story will be so shallow, right? So this is about what listening to the living talking about Anayat, for example. For the dead, I mean, listening to the dead is completely different story. Actually, they speak to us in different ways through their writing, sometimes through their the moment they lived in, sometimes. But we have to have this channel between us and them. And you have to be really in love first, right? You have to be able to listen to the dead so they can speak to you. I mean, I can't say this about other important dead for me, but this happened with Anayat. It doesn't mean that it will happen with everybody. The language, I think your question about language includes also translation, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So I actually, from very early time in my career, I started to think about, I mean, at the beginning, if you are a young writer and someone is translating you have an anxiety. You want things to be exact, even if you don't know the other language, as if you are thinking always about something that will be, erased or absent from your writing. But with time, really, you learn that the translator, you have to trust the translator. And with English language, I had the opportunity to read. It doesn't happen with the other translations of Traces of Enayat to, for example, Portuguese or Spanish or Italian. I don't read these languages. And I learned during the process to give the translator space. It's not like everything I think is right has to be changed, or you know what I mean. I usually share notes about misunderstanding, or I feel it's explaining, and the Arabic does not explain. I'm very economical actually in my use of Arabic language always, and the translation can't, obey this because of the differences between the two languages and the two cultures. Sometimes the translator has to add a word, like the journalist. Arab readers know that this is a famous journalist or actress. They don't need this word. So I started to be more tolerant about translation. Like it actually, it might not bring everything to the other language, but it might also bring things that did not exist, meaning it gives the text another life to be read by other readers coming from different languages that might actually see it differently. And this is why we have really to accept sometimes that these differences between the original text and translation.
Well, we've reached the end of our scheduled time. So, audience, I'd like to thank you for all of your thoughtful questions. Please join me in thanking Dr. Mersal for being with us today.
Bye-bye.